Hello and welcome to another edition of the Legal Zone. Now, I know we have been off the air for a long time. Some of you have written in asking what's going on. We've been busy. We've been doing what we do and representing clients, traveling, doing a lot of things. That's the reason why we've been off the air. We haven't forgotten about you guys. We love you guys and we appreciate you tuning in. And we're back now and we have a very special guest. But before I get into that, let me welcome the crew. Mr. John Celotti. How you doing this morning, John Celotti?
I'm great, Salon. Always good to be here, sir.
We've missed you.
It's been a while, but it's again good to be back in the zone, as we say.
Yes, it is. Dr. Cheney, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great. I like the hair. I haven't seen you in a while.
Well, you do the best you can with what you're working with.
It's working.
It's working for you, I tell you.
Thank you both very much.
All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome again, everyone. And we're going to talk today about, let me share my screen. There's a bar exam that was just taken in the end of July. I hope you all did well. Specific performance. Now, what is that? I don't know if most of you might not have heard this term, specific performance. The legal definition is it's a contractual remedy in which the court orders a party to actually perform its promise because monetary damages are somehow inadequate to fix the harm. That's the legal definition. But what does all of that mean, really? It basically means that if you have a contract, an agreement with someone, and you don't perform, the court can order you to perform. Now, this remedy, specific performance, it's hardly ever used because it comes across almost as slavery. You have a contract with someone, say you're a performing artist, you sing, and you have a contract to do a concert. But then you say, you know what? I don't feel like singing today. I don't want to do it. Now, a specific performance remedy would get an order from a court saying, no, you have to do that anyway. So the courts usually don't order specific performance in that type of situation. They'll calculate some sort of damages and they'll say, okay, if you don't, it's going to be very hefty to you. And not only that, you can't perform anywhere else. I think the artist formerly known as Prince had a situation like that where he had contracts to make certain amount of albums and he wanted to get out of it, but they said, well, okay, if you do, you're going to have a hard time because you're not going to be able to release anything. So he had to do these albums. The situation where you find specific performance is in real estate contracts, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But let's talk about the three elements of specific performance. If you're a law student and you're taking the bar, you might want to write these down. Three elements to specific performance. How do you know you can plead or file something with the court to get specific performance? One, you have to have a valid contract. You have to have an enforceable contract, something that's written and is binding. You can't have some sort of verbal, I promise to come over and take you out. There was an actual lawsuit where this guy took a lady out on a date and she tried to sue him. Crazy. You have to have an enforceable contract. Two, compliance by the plaintiff. The plaintiff, as you know, literally means the one who is bringing suit. So if you're suing, you have to have clean hands. You have to have complied with all the terms of the contract. And then three, failure of the defendant, the one who's accused. Defendant literally means the one who is defending. If someone is accusing you of something, you are the defendant. You have to have failed to perform on one of those parts of the contract. So again, mainly in real estate transactions. Why? Because real estate is considered unique. There's only one house like your house. even though builders try to duplicate houses, the location, that type of house, whatever you have your eye on, there's nothing like it. So the courts say, well, if you were in a contract to buy a house and all of a sudden the seller says, I don't want to sell to him anymore. I didn't like the way he was looking at me when we were doing the walkthrough or something crazy. You could file for specific performance if you complied with your terms of the contract and the defendant failed. That's a situation where the law says that particular house, even if you walk away, money cannot make you whole. The only thing that can make you whole is the property. So you sue for specific performance, which would say you can't sell that house to anybody else but this person. Well, how does that happen? There's this word. How do you protect your interest in a piece of real estate? It's called a les pendens. So let's say I want to buy Dr. Cheney's house. She has a beautiful piece of land out in Virginia, maybe. And we contract. She's going to sell it to me for a really good amount. And then something happens along the way where she changes her mind. And we have closing on August the 8th. And I show up and she doesn't. How am I going to stop her from selling it to John Celotti, who might be offering her more money and treated her better than I did? Because if he comes in, he could just say, oh yeah, let's do this contract and I'll get it. And then it's forever gone. That unique piece of land that I wanted, John now owns. Could I sue John to get it? No. That's where the les pendens comes in. A les pendens is pretty much notice to the world that the real estate is part of a litigation. So this les pendens gets recorded in the land records of whatever state you're selling. Now, as soon as I do that, so Dr. Cheney doesn't show up on August the 8th, I freak out and I say, oh no, she breached our contract. We were supposed to be closing today. What is she doing? Well, the first thing I do is I file this les pendens in the land records in Virginia. Now, when John tries to buy the property, this les pendens is going to show up. And 99.9% of the time, a title company is not going to allow anyone to buy this property because now they know if they buy it and a court says I own it, they're going to lose their money. So this is how you protect your interest in property, and then you sue for specific performance to order the court to allow you to purchase the house. And that is what our guest is going to talk about today. Our guest today, his name is Mr. Emmanuel Martin. And he had a very similar situation. Good morning, Mr. Martin.
Good morning, Salon.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. Great to have you. So tell us who you are, where you live, and what's happened in your case. By the way, Mr. Martin is a past client of ours. Go ahead.
All right. Well, like Salon mentioned, my name is Emmanuel Martin. I'm here in the DC area, and Mr. Salon helped me with my case that's similar to what he was explaining. In early 2021, I was looking to purchase a multi-unit property, and my wife and I found a location here in Southeast DC. It was actually a pocket listing, but we found the property.
What's the pocket listing? What's that?
A pocket listing is a property that hasn't been placed on the market yet. So as a buyer, it gives you a good opportunity to bid on a property and not have any competition with any other buyers. So yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So we found a pocket listing. It's a 4-unit, and we fell in love with it. The numbers made sense. So my realtor reached out to the seller's realtor agent and drew up a contract. We had a ratified contract on signed contract on January 29th of 21. Then we went into the process on, having inspections done and things of that nature. So over the course of the original purchase, we had a lot of holdups. So whether there was items that found an inspection, for instance, the roofing needed to be done, as well as some exterior, rear exterior items needed to be addressed. The seller did not want to pay for that. So in order to push the deal along, I went ahead and paid for those items to get fixed. And then it came down to actual inspections of the property. And as everyone knows, in 2021, due to COVID and just, where things were, appraisers were hard to find. So that extended the process. Amendments had to been signed from both parties because of that. And then everything came down to TOPA. TOPA is basically, I don't know. Let me see if I can.
We've had several shows on TOPA, but go ahead and.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
So
TOPA
so what do you understand TOPA to be?
basically it gives the current renters the opportunity to buy the property. That's what I understand.
Exactly. Perfectly said.
So everything came down to TOPA. For some reason, the TOPA wasn't completed earlier on in the process. So the seller had to make sure that was done.
Now this is important. Whose responsibility was it for the TOPA signatures? Was it yours or was it the seller's?
It was the seller's responsibility.
Okay. That's going to be an important factor as we go on. Go ahead.
Yep. All right. So we finally got the signatures. We finally see all the signatures. Oh, I'm sorry. I left out a part. So it's a 4-unit property. 3 out of the 4 units are occupied by tenants. So we finally got all signatures for the TOPA, and we're looking to close on June 1st or 2nd, right? My lender had released the funds to the title company. And here we are the morning of. I reached out to the title company. So mind you guys, I'm a first-time home buyer. So this whole experience, I was kind of on everyone's nerves because I'm always asking questions and making sure all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. So this morning, the morning of, I reached out to the title company to ask, hey, how do I bring payment? What form should I be, payment should I be bringing to closing? And that's when things started to go awry. The title company mentioned that the seller wasn't going to show up. And they just told us to wait till the afternoon to find out more. Obviously, a bunch of phone calls were made, and we found out that the seller didn't want to close. We told them, hey, why don't we just give you about 24, 48 hours to reconsider before we start going down a different path. So he didn't accept that, and then that's when I reached out to Salon Phillips here and told him my case, and I immediately asked him what can be done. Obviously, I was concerned, and we already had a little bit of evidence saying that the seller wanted to go in a different direction, possibly sell to someone else. And that's when he mentioned to me and introduced me to what a less pendens was and what it would do. So first thing we did was we put a less pendens on the property, and then we filed a suit against the seller.
Okay, and so this was June of 2021.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So what happened after that? We filed the suit, the seller, and you did have documentation where this seller just felt he can get more money. And we're not going to mention his name because we know now that people watch the show, right, John? And we get all kind of comments from other attorneys, and yeah, so we won't mention the seller's name. But he was a character. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to sell it to him. I can get more money. And just went away his merry way, like nothing was going to happen. So we filed that, but things didn't go smoothly after that. What happened afterwards?
Yeah. So, the seller just strongly believed that there wasn't a ratified contract in place. Basically, what happened was that the seller believed that the contract was breached at some point. But what he didn't pay attention to was that TOPA element. But so basically, over the next 30 to 60 days, we're just trying to get in communication with the seller's party. And it was just very challenging, right? No one knew how to reach him, to the point where when it was time to, I don't know forgive me, I don't know the correct terminology, but when you file a suit on someone, there's papers that are hand delivered to them. It was even a challenge trying to find him, which address was correct. But we went over months of that. There were a couple times when we finally reached the seller, he offered some money for me to go away, just basically drop it. And can I share numbers or roundabout numbers or?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
But
So-
before you go into that, remember we spoke earlier, let me share this, because this is important. That in order for someone to bring a suit, and in this case, we were bringing the specific performance suit because the guy didn't follow through, the attorney will always try to find things that the plaintiff didn't do, because that would invalidate a specific performance claim. So they were trying to say, well, no. He breached. And there were certain dates that they were supposed to be closing. And as Emmanuel said, it kept getting extended because delays from the appraiser and all these other things. And so they were trying to pin it on him. And we were finally able to say, no, he did everything he was supposed to do. That TOPA issue was the responsibility of the defendant. And once when we were able to label that, the attorney was like, all right, there's nothing more we can do. Great guy, great attorney. I can't say anything bad about him. He's a great guy, fair, but they didn't have anything left. Go ahead.
Yep. And to Mr. Phillips' point, it got to the point where they wanted me to provide proof that I had a lender and that, I had the money ready. And
I was trying everything.
yeah. But once we shared emails and text messages, they clearly understood. But I was trying to share that the sale price, the original sale price was around $1 million. And when everything fell apart some of the offers that he gave to walk away were like $10,000, $15,000. And mine, I paid for the repairs to the roof, the exterior, as well as legal fees by this point. So I was offering putting even more what I've come out of pocket for. So this went on. I think we started our hearings as well. And consistently, Mr. Phillips reached out to their lawyer, just trying to the ball to get it to the finish line. By this point, my original lender couldn't hold the original rate, which comes into factor as this thing closes out. But let me kind of fast forward to the end. Once they finally agreed to settle outside of court, the biggest challenge then becomes putting me in my original place at the time of closing, meaning that my monthly payment would need to be the same as it was June of 2021. Any costs or anything that I would have received, I should still receive at the new closing date. So that became a challenge. I was using FHA as my means to acquire this property. Also, I was coming in with an interest rate at 2.25 because remember how crazy things were early 21.
Yeah, June 2021. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so by the time they came to their senses, let's say that, the interest rate had pretty much doubled, right? It was fluctuating anywhere between 5% and 6%. So my lender at the time was like, Mr. Martin, he can only pay down points, but so far, like he couldn't get me back to my original 2.25. And then what that caused was, due to amortization, he had to have paid the difference of what that original interest was to the new interest rate. and deduct that from the sale price to get my monthly payment back to that amount that it would have been at June of 21.
Right.
So
That's very important, everyone. Listen to this. So when someone breaches a contract and you sue for specific performance, you have to place the buyer back in the position that he was in had the sale went through. So in this case, in June 2021, the interest rates was a little over 2%. He would move forward with a monthly payment for the next 30 years at a certain dollar amount. A year later, in order to put him back where he would have been in 2021, it cost them a lot. They could only buy down a certain amount of points, which would have had him like what, 3% or something. He could bought him down from 5 something to maybe 3 something, but he was still at 2 something. So in order to get his monthly payment back to what it was in 2021, they now had to reduce the sale price. So he was selling it for originally $1 million. And so he had to reduce it to, what was the final number he had to reduce it to?
essentially 30% off. The final number came to like
It was like in the
700
700 something, right? And not only that, during the year when he first contracted, that property appreciated, right? So now it was worth more than it was when he first bought it. So maybe he bought a property for 700,000 that's now worth over $1 million. And it's all because the seller thought he was cute and could just get away with doing what he wanted to do. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that out to let everybody know.
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty nice. So yeah, by the time we closed, there was a 30% price reduction on the sale of the property. The lawyer fees had to been covered, as well as because it was a multi-unit and it was generating income, he had to pay me the lost income that I would have received, which I closed on the property June of 22. So 12 months had gone by. So yeah, there was a couple items. I think those were the 3 main ones that he had to make sure that I was, he had to pay me back for. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, my biggest lesson from this was to make sure as a real estate investor that I'm paying attention to all the details and paying attention to contracts, because that's what really got the seller caught up, because he did not pay attention to the fine print. And in our original contract, it said the seller is responsible for making sure that TOPA was completed. And if anything doesn't happen, the seller is liable. So yeah, patience and making sure to read all the fine print, or paying someone to for you.
Yeah, that's true. Now, 2 of the fine prints, the TOPA, because again, the argument was who breached? Did Mr. Martin breach? Did the seller breach? And then we got to that TOPA and was like, okay, well, the TOPA wasn't performed by the closing date. Whose responsibility was that? And that's the seller. So it's a clear slam dunk, you breached. Now, in the contract, and everyone listening, make sure when you read your contracts, you see who's going to be responsible for the attorney fees. In Emmanuel's contract, it said whoever loses this suit is responsible for the other side's attorney fees. So the seller also, in addition to all that stuff that he had to pay for, he had to pay for the attorney fees. Now, also for the investors out there, Emmanuel was a very astute, smart investor. He bought a 4-unit and moved into one of the units. So that was his home. Now he can get an FHA loan to pay for that. He didn't have to go to a loan shark and get these high interest rates, because now this is his primary residence, but he's also getting income from the other 3. So excellent job, Emmanuel. Everything's going great with you now?
Yeah, just living the life of a property manager now. But it's going good. It's going good.
Awesome. Awesome. Dr. Cheney.
Okay. I know a little bit about TOPA. One of the questions that I have is what stands out as a lesson in your legal journey, but you pretty much have already answered that, except your answer didn't include knowing the laws. And what I'm getting at, you actually are now in the unit that you have purchased a unit and all that, or the entire place with the house. But TOPA starts out, you as an owner would have known about TOPA. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
It's almost that, and your lawyer should have known about TOPA. You know, what I'm getting at, when you file the lawsuit, the question comes to me that you were trying to figure out who was at fault. Was it the buyer or was it the seller? It's absolutely the seller. And I would think that it wouldn't have even been a lawsuit to know that. You see what I'm getting at? And how
Yeah.
come you didn't know that? I mean, it's just, because we've been through 2 TOPAs here.
okay.
And it is, and I was tenant president in one of them. And that was truly something. And they said, if I could go through and win this thing for the tenants, that I could be mayor of this city. That's how involved this is. I mean, I lost a lot. Friendship, attorneys, a lot. I felt at a certain point, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but I felt at a certain point, I was like Michael Jackson, just abused by the public and all that kind of thing. And I was lucky that we had this attorney that took care of me. He said, Arlena, just lay low. Don't let that stress bother you. And it really did help. But back to you, the other thing that's bothering me, and I can't remember my notes, I thought the law for 4 units on TOPA changed. Do you know about that? That now that you're in TOPA, now that you're in a unit rather, TOPA would not be applying to you. It has to be more than 4 units. For example, we live in a 289 unit high-rise building. We are in it, but the single family housing, that's what we're talking about. That's where you would be rated as far as TOPA, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, have you heard that it's no longer?
I
Yeah.
have,
Okay, no.
I have
That's why
not
I
heard
was
of it.
wondering about the dates. Because remember we had the guy from Southeast Washington on, and he was talking about TOPA, and we were talking about how in different parts of the country, people are using the Washington, DC model for TOPA. And one of the things that we didn't like is the idea that you guys would be able to no longer be involved with TOPA. They took that away. And I thought that was in 2018. I'd have to look, and I was trying to look on my cell phone to find out the date. But this particular guy is fighting. His name is Andy McGuire. He's fighting to get single family housing back in the mix, something you wouldn't like, but back in the mix. So I wonder if they had to pay the tenants at all during the TOPA process, in your case.
Gotcha. So I know in terms of FHA, it's required. So maybe that's the caveat. So, so maybe that's why it needed to be completed. And then, 4 units or less are considered residential properties. So I don't know if those are factors why, the TOPA was still needed to be upheld. But I know,
Yeah.
I know
Tenants
at the-
Opportunity to Purchase Act. That's what that means.
gotcha.
But it sounds as if there was a backstory that you didn't know about, and they knew about it, and they're trying to blame you. Nowhere in the world you could blame the seller for TOPA. I'm sorry, the buyer for TOPA. There's no
Yeah.
way, and they knew that.
Yeah, but no. So we brought up the TOPA. They was trying to say that he didn't close on time because of the appraiser's delay. And so the last extension, they said,
Right.
oh, well, this is not signed. Mr. Martin had signed the last extension and they didn't sign it, or vice versa. So they were saying, see, he didn't give this extension. So you were supposed to close back in, I think it was May. And we were like, no, this was implied. And so it was a fight because it wasn't anything clear. Then we brought up, well, wait a minute, there's this TOPA issue. And that was never completed before the sale. And we spoke to the title company and everyone else, and it was like, yeah, it could not have been done unless this was done. So they couldn't wiggle their way out of that anymore, but they didn't try to put that on him.
Yeah, we went through the Liz Pendens stuff too. The title, putting a lock on the title. We went through that too, because it is really a cutthroat business, this TOPA business. So you'll find out that you won't have to be involved with that anymore. The other thing, I think you've already answered that. What would you do? What you've done differently? What you would have done differently? You've answered that. What were some of the ups and downs you may have experienced internally?
Oh man. For me, yes, I was a first-time home buyer, but it was a journey getting to that point, right? So, I was trying to be as smart as an investor as I could coming in the door. There's no way I would have been able to afford $1 million property without leveraging, different techniques and understanding the real estate market. So, I had a lot going on there. In terms of my career, I was in the middle of, basically, I was receiving multiple offers from different companies. And because of this deal, it kind of hindered me on jumping on some of these opportunities because, the lender doesn't want to see you transferring jobs and things of that nature.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Can I? I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was at a place where I was doing well for myself and basically was moving over to being a full-time business owner of my own. And, mind you, June 21, we're supposed to close. My original lender hung along to the fall of 21, trying to see this through. And it just wasn't happening. But then in the fall of 21 is when I kind of went full-time independent in order to receive a contract. It was a large government contract. I just couldn't turn it down. After speaking to another lawyer, because the issue is when you go from a W-2 to a W-9, right? They want to see that you have 2 years history as a business owner or as a W-9 employee. What I had to do was essentially pay myself a salary, right? So that I would still remain as a W-2 and then provide a letter to the new lender, basically saying I had a job change, but that I was still in the same profession, that I was still doing the same type of work. That way they can see that I didn't just change industries altogether, which would have made, alarm them and probably wouldn't have gave me the loan. So I had that going on. I also had, I had illness in the family that was just, it was one of those things when one of my close family members, found out that they had cancer. So there was a lot of financial equity into this, emotional equity into this. Also, we were trying to, my wife owns our current residence, and, we wanted to rent this place out, while we lived in the new, 4 units. So it was very calculated. And, sometimes people don't understand when you're calculated, they just want to kind of push through some things. I noticed that as well, like from other parties, both on my side as well as on the opposite side, that they just wanted me to push me right along. But it's like, no, I need things to be this type of way. I was getting on Mr. Phillips' nerves a couple of times, just like, no, I need the deal to be like this in order for it to fully make sense. Just receiving the property wasn't enough. I need to make sure those numbers matched because of all that I was having to go through. And it wasn't like he was giving me more than what I would have had at the time of the original closing, So I wasn't out for blood. I was just trying to be made whole. But I will say it was challenging times, and patience was definitely a skill set that I was able to strengthen over this time, and just understanding. And at the end of this, I learned from the seller's mistakes as well. And that was a great takeaway.
And to just piggyback off of that, so in negotiations with the attorney, I was coming hard. Your guy is wrong. Why are we going through this? Let's just close. That's pushing him. And then Emmanuel said, well, I switched jobs and we can't get the loan. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I had to start backpedaling and telling the attorney, well, maybe we could talk it over. Maybe we could, because I'm trying to buy time, because even if they said, okay, we'll close now, I know we couldn't. So Emmanuel was able to find a lender who can now use the same job industry that he just mentioned. And so I switched back. I'm like, okay, look, we need to close now. What are you waiting for? So it was a lot of me dipping, dodging, and it was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
So you're actually the landlord in this building.
Yes. Yep.
I bet your tenants really like that, because to me, that means you're going to really keep the building up.
Right. Right.
How are your tenants?
They're okay.
Mhm.
Like I said, I'm still learning this process, so I'm trying to gauge on where I can push and pull, and when you're also a tenant there as well, that access there, you try to figure out where that line is going to be. So it's definitely a new learning experience for me, but right now it's okay.
You don't have a rental office, do you? You're the rental office too, right?
No, I do not have a rental office. No.
So everything comes knocking on your door then.
Well, right now I use a third-party application where they can communicate with me through there, and I've partnered with a not a property management company, but more like a maintenance company, where they have a monthly service fee, and they can take care of general items, and then larger projects they address as well. So about 40 some odd days in, and I'm gonna go with this system for right now, see if I can run it like this. But having multiple businesses and also trying to be a property manager, I quickly saw that it's gonna take a lot of time. So I'm still debating on whether how close I need to be with this the daily operations of this property.
Thank you.
That's it?
Mhm.
All righty, Mr. Celotti.
Well, I mean, this has worked out so well, so great. That's the most important thing. Great that this has worked out well through both all the efforts that went into this. But I'm trying to see, well, okay, since we focus on injustice, right? That's the legal zone, tackling injustice. From your perspective, Mr. Martin, is there a place or a point where you feel an injustice occurred to you?
Definitely. When it first happened, I just felt like someone was trying to cheat me out of a deal, right? You have this signed contract. Yes, we had multiple addendums over the course of the original contract, but first timer, I'm gonna call myself a first timer, a newbie in this. I just was like, well, I have a contract. It says it right here. There shouldn't be an issue. Like Dr. Cheney mentioned, like this would have been cut dry if they just, saw the facts here. But when even with all this, I felt like my voice wasn't being heard, right? Like I felt like, hey, me just saying, hey, I got this contract here, the guy would say, oh, you're right. And maybe within 5 days later, we would have closed. But the simple fact that, the lack of communication, what seemed like stubbornness, and just the confidence from the other side, it got to a point where I was like, I'm losing out here, like beyond just the sale of the property. I was sharing with Mr. Phillips, like all these things like that I was trying to do at that time. And it, you feel like it's not fair, but in those times I find that you still have to stand firm and what you believe is correct, and what is yours. If you believe in it enough, you shouldn't falter or sway. So I did feel the injustice, but after a while, I don't know, once calm heads prevailed, cool heads prevailed, I just kind of stayed firm.
Or you knew who to pay to be your hothead. Not you.
That's fine.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna delegate the hothead.
Sure.
Dr. Cheney, why you laugh so loud on that?
I think John is correct.
Well, I mean, well, there's truth to that. I mean, it plays
He's a
out of
pit
something
bull. It's
that
good to
Martin
have
said
one.
earlier. That one of the things, you know, learning from the other side's mistakes, but also knowing when to bring in as again, use your term as a first timer, but I don't think just even if you were a second or third timer, you know, knowing when I need to bring in backup, specialized backup to do this. So much of, I think, what we see is situations where people find themselves in situations, and by the time they come to us, the thing is so out of control. And now you're just sort of clawing back just to, you know, to get out of the hole. You didn't wait that long. Yeah, things were not going. Obviously, if everything goes well, you never need that kind of backup. But it's sort of knowing when, oh, the hole is starting to grow here. And I really do need to find somebody to be my hothead and figure out then with that person, because I know the other thing is always, how do I pay for this? Now that worked out particularly well since your contract expressly said, you know, loser pays for the attorney, and you clearly had a very strong case. But again, just that's an important learning for anybody to say, it's time to call in cavalry, whatever you want to phrase it. Because yeah, there are certain things
And
that
it's
are
very
beyond.
good. It's very good that he did it as soon as possible, because had the seller found a buyer that's not on notice is a bona fide buyer. So had he gotten an opportunity to sell that property before we filed the less pendants, he would not be sitting where he is right now.
That's right. So it's again a lesson for any of us that we have to, you know, make those choices. Sometimes maybe a little quicker than we're comfortable with, but you know, it's amazing. Dr. Cheney, I'm sure, could be very much speak at length at the grinding process of the law and how slow everything can be. But then there are moments like this one, man, you know, that window was real small. And you miss that window, you miss the window. And so that's part of the balance in the situation, is sticking to your principles, knowing what's right, knowing when to call in somebody to pick up where, yeah, okay, this piece, I'm ready to do the work here and be the landlord and run the building, but handle all these legal niceties, no, that's not my specialty. And here's,
Yeah.
and your case is a perfect example of how much of a difference that made in you.
You know, the other thing that, if I recall correctly, it is DC law, and that's what I assume we're talking about. There's a penalty when you violate TOPA. But the only thing is you have to be caught. If you're not caught, there's no penalty. And I'm still wondering if that landlord, the backstory part of it, he was caught. But then he may not have been, because it sounds like TOPA's an issue, big issue. But it may not have been for him because he was doing some crooked stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think he realized, you could correct me if I'm wrong, Emmanuel, that he was selling a good property for, maybe it was the market value, but something that would have been worth a lot more. And so he just wanted to get rid of Emmanuel any way he can. I'm not selling it to him. Just get out of my face. I'll give you $10,000. I'm keeping this property because I know what it's worth now. And he was trying to do everything that he could to get out of it. But
Well,
a contract is a contract.
Salon, do they ever do that when they find out that the interest spurred that because Mr. Martin was interested in purchasing, then wait a minute, I can get more money.
I don't know what his reasoning was. What did you hear about that, Martin?
Yeah, so like I said, because it was a pocket listing, the way this whole thing started, he had multiple 4-unit buildings for sale around this time. We actually, another building piqued our interest, but when we finally, put in the offer, it was already pending. So the agent is the one who shared this property. And it sounds like there must have been a conversation had between the seller and his agent. That was kind of like when they were discussing their game plan, right, for the year. I think the property that I acquired was on his caveat list, a maybe I'll sell it. But I think because, the market was hot, it was a seller's market, the agent might have just presented they offered the deal without presenting it to the seller properly, right? And so that's why it never felt like the seller was invested in this deal the whole time, right? When I did inspections, things needed to be done. He was like, nah, I don't want to do it, right? So I paid for it. So I don't think he was a motivated seller. But the fact that it made it as far as it did, I think, as it got closer to the end, he was kind of heard like he was trying to purchase another property himself and, wanted to get more money. It was something like that came up. And whatever the case may be, he was under contract, so he couldn't back out of it. So, yeah.
He was a very interesting guy. Serving him, as Emmanuel mentioned, was difficult because everything is in his wife's name. So trying to find where he lives, it was tough. Yeah, I don't know the guy, and we're not going to say his name because he might watch the show and then try to complain. But yeah, you're an interesting guy if you're watching. All right, John, I'm going to give you the last word.
Wow. Well, I think the last word is congratulations. Good luck in your venture. You've shown where, again, person sticking to his guns can come out on top. He can overcome the injustices. And that's the system working the way it should. And you never ended up in court, right? That's a part of this. You never had to go to court because you had all these things in place and you worked them, and that's the way the system is supposed to work. Court, that's all people ever see, but Celotti will tell you that's this much of the law. It's what it's that tip of the iceberg, but that's what people see. But much of the law should be that you never end up in court, and you're a great example where you didn't. So more power to you, and good luck in the years ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Emmanuel, for coming on the show. If there's any other legal services you need, you know where to find me.
For sure.
Dr. Cheney, thank you for gracing us again.
Okay.
We're going to have Dr. Cheney as the main person on the show. I'm putting it out there. She's going to be the main guest in the next couple of weeks to talk about injustice that she's going through. Mr. Celotti, as always, thank you very much.
You as well, Mr. Phillips.
And all of you out there, thank you. Subscribe at the little red button on the bottom. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thanks for watching our video. For experienced legal services in Washington, D.C., Alabama, and Washington State, visit our website at remaslaw.com or call us at 1-833-329-1799.